Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview Committee. I'm Councillor Paul Prentice, Chair of this committee. The Overview Committee undertakes pre-decision scrutiny of reports going to the Cabinet on the Council's policies, projects, budget and services. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you're seated in the public gallery, it is possible that the cameras may capture your image. And if you wish to avoid being filmed, it is recommended that you make a member of staff aware who can direct you where to sit. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. And there is no fire alarm planned for this evening, but should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left, through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please meet at the Tower House car park. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at dusk, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall via the side exit behind the glass door. And John, do we have any apologies for absence?
We do. We have apologies from Councillor Flanagan.
Thank you. And do we have any substitute members this evening?
There are no substitutes today.
Okay. Have we had any declarations of interest in advance?
None received in advance, Chair.
Thank you. And do members have any declarations they want to raise? I should probably just mention I've got a residence off-street parking permit. Just to be clear, Councillor Thomas.
On a similar vein, I've got a brother who's a taxi driver, so.
Any more for any more? You've got a car, right? Many members have cars, I think we can say. And Marie.
Thank you, Chair. Just to declare I'm a director on the Canenco board. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there are no public speakers registered for the... Oh, there was another one. Sorry, was there another? Do we have any directors?
Apologies, Chair. Yes, I'm a director of Stour Environmental Credits.
No problem. There's no public speakers registered for this meeting. Next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of December 2025. I'm assuming everyone's happy and has read those. Can they be agreed by general assent? Yep. Great. Okay, so we go on to item 6, which is proposed changes to charges and conditions in council car parks 2026-27. That's the OSPO, pages 13 to 39 of your packs. We're considering the report of Bill Hicks, Director of Place, and he's also covering for Richard Moore this evening, who's unwell.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. As I say, I'm here to, at last minute, replace Richard Moore, who's off ill today. So if there are any questions that I can't answer tonight, I'm very happy to take them away and come back to you with the responses accordingly. To point out that the report sets out in Appendix 1 the proposed changes to parking charges that, if approved, would come into effect on the 1st of April 2026. An eight-week public consultation was carried out concurrently with the Council's budget proposals, and there were just 29 representations, which is the lowest number we can remember for many years. To give a comparison, last year we had 249 submissions as part of the consultation. The item that received most objections, 18 in total, is the proposal to increase Band 1 car parking by 10 pence, or 2.7%. And the reasons for objection are: 1, Band 1 tariffs are already too high. 2, parking usage is not increasing. 3, businesses are struggling and this increase will reduce footfall. Parking data is included in the report, comparing the financial year 23-24 with 24-25, and this shows that the strategy in Canterbury to encourage drivers to switch from Band 1 car parks to Band 3 car parks is taking place. You will note figures that say that the move in Castle Street multi-storey has gone up by 8% year on year, in Station Road West by 3%, and in Holman's Meadow by 8%. And it also encourages people to use the park and ride, and this is working. And overall parking acts overall across both park and ride and parking are very similar to last year. They're up by 0.7%. As such, this proposed 10% per hour increase should continue this trend, we believe. The views and comments of this committee will be included in the report to Cabinet, and I therefore pass back to the Chair for any further comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. So I'd like to recommend to Cabinet, I propose that item numbers 1 to 4, as set out in Appendix 1 and 2, are implemented on the 1st of April 2026. Do I see a seconder, please, so we can start that debate? Councillor Mellish, thank you very much. So with that then, we'll open the debate. Anyone like to start off? Yeah, Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Big pardon. While I have no sort of direct objections to the way to the report, what I am kind of concerned about is first the focus that it seems to be Canterbury City centric. That it really takes into account. It talks about how journeys to the central town, central city, are being conducted, and that the PNR has nothing to do with any other area outside of the city centre. I would have liked to have seen, I know it's not part of the report, I would like to have seen some sort of reference to alternative transport and to sustainable transport, rather than just as part of the aims and objectives. For instance, I'm looking up today about if we want to go from Beltinge to Whitstable Harbour, the South Quay, which is one of the destination points that we're trying to develop. I'm on the Harbour Board, so I know the investment that we're putting into the Harbour Board. We want to get there. It will take, from where I live, an hour and a quarter with, I think it's 2 buses, but they turn into 3 because of the strange nomenclature. It's say it take about an hour and a quarter. It will cost me over £11 return to do so as an individual. It's and a bus this afternoon at 14:51 would get me the next bus after that was 1,800 hours, over 1,800 hours. So again, it's about the frequency of travel, etc. Why would I pay the additional fees to go and park at the Whitstable Harbour Board, the harbour, when I can actually get there in 15 minutes rather than an hour and a quarter? So there's a lot of sort of, what I would like to see more in the report is actually, as I'm saying, we talk about sustainable transport, we don't reflect it in the report and how we can actually focus on that. It may be because it needs to be elsewhere in another a tangent to this. But we do need to think about how does the rest of the town, how does the rest of the district actually get around? And the parking in some ways, I'm afraid, is going to happen, and we will suck up the additional charges because there is no alternative. So I'd like to see sort of what discussions there are taking place with Stagecoach or alternative service providers about actually providing more service. Again, in the Beltinge area, and Jeanette will be, so Councillor Stockley will be aware of this, we're getting another 1,200 homes into the area, which we are developing all the time. That's over 2,000 cars because there is no bus service after 7:30 and there is no service on a Sunday. But there is no indication of any change happening in that. And I can't see any of the changes that go through planning in terms of bus or sustainable transport. And again, I think a reference to that in this report would have been useful because then would be an indication about where we're going, how we want to develop, and also indicate to Stagecoach and other providers what we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mellish. Bill, did you want to come back in anything specifically?
I mean, all I would come back at this point and say, Councillor, is obviously that will be part of the wider discussions on the transport strategy, and a lot of those points will be raised within the wider piece of work that I know Richard and his team are doing. Obviously, this is very specific in terms of off-street parking and what's happening there, but I do take on board your points, and I've made a note, and I'll definitely make sure that these are passed back to Richard for consideration as it goes forward.
I raise it because in the report we talk about alternative sustainable transport, and if we don't actually say how that's happening and what we might be doing to achieve that, then there's a hole in the report. Even if it's just a couple of paragraphs to say where we're going with that. Thank you.
think that raises quite a good point, because on one hand, we are talking about parking charges and not bus fares. However, within the report, I think, as you mentioned, we talk about money being set aside for parking promotions. Now, in my mind, there's nothing that stops this council subsidising bus fares if it wanted to. Clearly, there's a very limited amount of money through which to do that. But if it wanted to do something around bus fares, there's a whole demographic of people in the district who don't drive, don't want to drive, but would like the equally face the same cost of living pressures getting around the district. And we have put, we have promoted a bus first strategy. So there's possibly a little bit of disjointedness there. But I think that's definitely something we'd like fed back, actually, because I think that's a fair point when you consider everything in the round. Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. In the report, it talks about Herne Bay and Whitstable and the decrease in usage of the car parks, but the increase in income. But I do think we're missing a trick. I think we are sitting there with empty car parks. We're coastal towns and we are seasonal. And we charge the same on a wet January morning to park in our car park as we do on a lovely sunny Sunday when we've got lots of tourists coming in. I do think we should be seriously looking at a Monday to Friday use of our car parks, particularly Goddle Tank and William Street. It's William Street, isn't it? And the Neptune one, I don't think is quite so important, because that is very much a tourist-led one. Having a rate that works, that brings people in to go for a bit of lunch and a bit of shopping, that sort of thing. It's great to see the increase at the Park and Ride, but Park and Ride doesn't work for Whitstable. We have to drive around all of Canterbury to get to a Park and Ride, and people are very fed up. It's one complaint I get a lot. Oh, I went to the Marlow. It cost me more to park than the ticket. This sort of complaint. And it's like, oh yeah, it's all right, you can get the bus. Well, actually, you have to get off at London Road or the bus station, which is quite a hike, because that's the way the bus goes. It doesn't come through Westgate Towers. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting we knock Westgate Towers down, but yeah, shorter buses, narrower buses possibly. But so there is some real issues here. People are being denied access to facilities that as taxpayers they pay for as well, so, but they don't get to use unless you're in the centre of things. So I would really like to see us do that. Just have a bit of better thinking, because we're sitting with them empty when they could be earning, if they were, £1.50 an hour on a Monday to Friday, they could certainly be earning us a damn sight more money. Thank you.
There's possibly a point about sort of dynamic pricing there, isn't there? Yep, I think that point's been taken. Councillor Thomas was first, then Councillor Bowman. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. On the similar note of Councillor Naomi Smith, parking revenue for Herne Bay is down 9%, but the revenue's up 20%. Well, that's good for the council, but not so good for traders in Herne Bay, residents. Herne Bay's on a turning point, as I can see. We need to try and encourage more people into there. So they need more revenue, and my residents in Herne Bay, they do seem to feel that the parking in Herne Bay is subsidising the Stowey Road Park and Ride, and the rest of the Park and Ride, as Councillor Naomi Smith said. I would like to Herne Bay councillors be consulted on some of the free parking, because to give free parking in Herne Bay on a Sunday, when most of the shops can't afford to be open on a Sunday, is kind of a kick in the teeth and a waste of money. a waste of time. I for one has fought over the years for William Street to be separately parking and free parking from 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock. And that was starting to work, but it's all been underturned under this new administration. I am extremely frustrated with that. And the whole point of that is to try and bring trade into Herne Bay in the evening, and also to bring some of the parking into the town that the residents have got flats and they haven't got off-street parking. It wasn't all about losing money. Some of it wasn't about money. It's about taking the off-street parking, bringing it into an empty car park. William Street car park is empty after 6, 7 o'clock. It's just an empty car park. So it may as well be full with no one parking there. I mean, I've not done the figures yet, but Richard Moore said it's going to increase with this new by £5,000 a year. I've not seen those figures. I will be emailing at some point once I get my head around it. I'm actually wondering, waiting to unitary, and hopefully things will go better, and hopefully we get things sorted out then, really, because we're not going to get sorted out at the moment. And when it comes to page 15, Reculver Park and Ride, sorry, not Reculver Park and Ride, I've got it in my brain now. That lost 22 grand, £22,000, and Rachel Carnac was saying, it's madness. People won't pay, people won't come. Now, either people are coming and then they're taking a chance because it's so expensive, not paying and not putting the revenue in. And if there's no ticket inspectors going there, they're probably getting away with it. And quite a lot of residents I've speak to actually don't bother paying anymore because they take the chance and pay the fine. And some of them say, I'm already in credit, so it doesn't really matter if I get a fine. So some of the parking may still be parking, but actually not getting tickets, which we wouldn't have reference of. And if local councillors could be consulted on some of the parking and the freebies and stuff like that, and to actually compare what we're doing through the other areas like Thanet, Dover and Deal, I'm kind of assuming that's coming in because of the unitary, so we can start comparing it, because eventually we'll be all under one big roof, and actually if you're charging X amount in Dover, then residents will start complaining about what they're doing, what you're paying in Canterbury at the moment and what you're paying in Herne Bay. They'll start comparing what Thanet's getting. And it's the same with the taxis. The taxis in Thanet are starting to have vehicles that are 10 years old, the same as Herne Bay. So it's going to come under one big umbrella. So hopefully things could get better. But yeah, it is quite frustrating when these things are put in. We've explained why we've changed these things. It's on record why it was different pricing, and then Alex Perkins basically turns around and said, we want it all the same. Well, actually, that might work in Canterbury, but it doesn't work on the coasts. And like I said, if we're losing that revenue, it's not the parking revenue is irrelevant, really, to a degree. What we want is more tourism coming into the town. If they come along and they get stitched up with the parking, they go, stuff this, I'm not coming there again. And we've lost that. We can't bring it back because they've had enough. So that's why some of the pricing's been done in the past differently for the coastal and for the town. And this administration has come through, we're going to utilise it all band 1, 2 and 3. Even I don't understand what they are. And it's just very, very frustrating. Thank you.
Councillor Botman.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to talk a bit to carry on what everyone else has said at the moment, about fairness across the whole of Herne Bay, Whitstable and Canterbury. I think if you go to park at the Riverside car park and go to the cinema, you get the parking for free. You don't have to park. You don't have to pay. And obviously, if you want to go to the cinema at the Cavern, or you go to the East Quay Shed you were talking about, or the play, it's not free for an event like that. So, is there a way to have sort of events free to encourage? Because it's not just about going there just to visit, you know, it's the cost of going to enjoy for entertainment has gone up so much. Businesses are struggling. So the way that Riverside work, is there a way of bringing that into other areas within the district? Because obviously it's nice. Well, it's okay for me because I live near there, but not for everybody else. And I'd like to, I'd like to see, you know, somewhere like the Cavenagh, the East Quay, you know, some sort of. It doesn't have to be all the time. It could be like during a week when it, you know, when it would be more for residents. And yeah, so I'd like to sort of, if that could be looked at, if possibly, or why, and also why the Riverside does work like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just a couple of comments. First of all, picking up on Herne Bay, I've got some year-on-year data which runs from April to December, which is quite interesting in that overall parking acts are down 3% in Herne Bay, April-December year-on-year. Although it's worth noting that we have the loss of some spaces in Market Street. There was a development on that site because it was leased to us, it's not ours, and that actually resulted in probably 2/3 of that quantity of acts not being able to happen because we'd lost the space. So actually a lot of the reduction can be directly attributed to the reduced capacity at that car park. So all in all, I'd say overall parking transactions in Herne Bay are relatively flat. Having said that, I know that over Christmas, and we looked at some Christmas Christmas data, the parking offers that were put forward have been very successful in Herne Bay. We had nearly 1,200 free acts of parking, which was over 35% up compared on the year before. So, I mean, I take all the points that were made on board. And I'm not saying that the couple of stats I've thrown on the table counteract that, but it's a mixed picture, I suppose, is what I'd say there. Yes, yeah.
And I suppose something which is a little bit out of scope of this report is what impact are the parking charges actually having on the local economy, and that's not something we can see in this report because that's not within the scope of the report. But that's an interesting piece of work to see. When people do go to William Street or wherever it happens to be, particularly on the coast, are they spending money in local businesses? Are they spending £2, £5, £10, £20 in local businesses? And that's something that's interesting to know, but we don't have that information right in front of us. Councillor Heaver.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to contribute to the consensus. I totally agree with Councillor Mellish. I think this is a Canterbury city-centric plan. I think it's entirely unsuitable for the coastal towns. I agree entirely with Councillor Naomi Smith. It does not take into account the seasonal variations. And I agree entirely with Councillor Thomas that it's not tourist or visitor focused. Herne Bay and Whitstable definitely are visitor-based economies, and we need a parking strategy that supports that, not damages it, which is what it's doing at the moment. I think also the report should be slightly more transparent with the public about the importance of parking revenue to the council's finances. That's not a sin, it's just a fact that 12 million quid, compares with revenue from council tax and from all commercial property. And I think people should understand that whilst we're talking about changes in people's behaviour and wanting people to engage in active travel and public transport, frankly, we'd be bankrupt within a very short time if they all decided to do that. So there's a fundamental dilemma there, which we might as well be honest about, because otherwise it just looks disingenuous. And my third point is the most important one from my point of view, because I've just been talking to traders in Whitstable High Street and Harbour Street today about various matters, and they are really cross and desperate, and they are struggling. Partly due to factors beyond this council's control, and in particular the increase in national insurance contributions make it very expensive to employ people, and also in particular the recent changes to rate or values, which means many traders in the High Street and Harbour Street are now paying double, or envisaging paying double what they were before. One trader told me today, who's an established and has a successful business in Whitstable High Street, that his payable amount of business rates will increase from 1,220 per calendar month to 2,150. Many traders running small modest shops are now looking at £20,000 per year just in business rates. That's beyond the control of this council, I completely understand. But when there's another hit from another government body, it does not go down well, and it's not good for the local economy at all. There's an enormous amount of resistance to this, enormous amount of anger about this. Most people I speak to, not just traders, but anecdotally and people in my ward, think parking rates in the district are extortionate, and the data supports that. If you look at comparable short-term parking rates in Deal and Faversham, and also we don't operate in a vacuum. You can go to Tesco's, you can go to Westwood Cross, you can go to Blue Water, you can go to the Prospect Shopping Estate on the Old Thanet Way in Whitstable where Marks and Spencer's, and you can park for free as long as you like. So we are actively penalising independent small business in Whitstable, in Herne Bay, and indeed in Canterbury with this very high rate of parking rates. Now, that may be necessary from a financial point of view, but in the long term, it will be damaging, and it's already causing damage to these businesses. There are schemes, I know, and people are grateful that there have been certain schemes where locals can register and park on certain days of the week. Most people think this is far too complicated and also doesn't reflect Councillor Naomi Smith's view about the seasonal business, or Councillor Thomas's view about the tourism visitor importance. They need free parking for everyone. You can park in Whitstable for a charge almost what you like on August Bank Holiday Monday, but at other times we need to encourage people into the town, not dissuade them and penalise them for doing so. Please, please convey this to the Cabinet. It's causing enormous hardship and difficulty for local independent traders in Whitstable, and they're very cross about it.
Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I do want to sort of, come back on the whole free parking, and it's been great when we've been given, I think we've got Thursdays and, have you got Wednesdays in Herne Bay at the minute? And we've got Thursdays in Whitstable, and nothing in Canterbury, and people in Canterbury are not very happy about that, but But the free parking is not as easy as you think it is. People have given up trying to get the residence permit discount. It's not easy. It's clunky. It's hard to get through the website. So people that didn't realise that they had to apply for it and thought, oh, I can just go and park, and that's not helped. So they've ended up paying as well, which has been a nightmare. We need to make the process easier. I don't understand how, if you're registered for ANPR, I suppose because some people could be out of the area if they're registered for ANPR, but if your address is linked to your ANPR account, why you can't automatically have it, and just make the process transparent and easy. And we need to do really good comms on the difference between, because I don't mind Band 1 at Gorrell, like you say, in the summer when people are coming and it's going, people are queuing to get into the car park, it's not a problem, but we do have it empty a lot of the other times. So if we can sort of make it easy, educate, help with some comms that educate residents on what their parking options are, because the amount of people that complain to me that, oh, I parked in Pound Lane, and it cost, I said, well, go to Canterbury West. Although it's a horrible car park, I'll be honest. It's, I parked in there. It's got a big puddle that you have to wade through to get back, pay and get back to your car. But Canterbury West is a lot cheaper, or Longport, or go to Radigan's, which is cheaper. But people don't understand the difference in the banding. So we really need to work at letting our residents know what they can do and where they can go. And maybe it can be something that goes out with their council tax. Although What?
Okay.
No.
Councillor Old was next. I've seen Councillor Mash.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies to more experienced councillors who know the answer to this question. But the income from parking enforcement, in other words, fines, does that come to this council? And is it from the car parks and from on-street parking? Does that both come to us?
Bill. For parking penalties you're talking about, so whether that's in an off-street car park of some sort or on-street parking.
I was told that because the street parking is KCC, that revenue goes to KCC, and we only get the revenue from parking fines in the car park. That sounds bizarre. Is that correct?
Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, sort of. On-street parking, we manage it for KCC, so we incur all of the costs as well as collect all of the income, and anything over and above the net cost of it, so any sort of profit, as it were, although it's not technically profit, any surplus, that's the word, then gets transferred back to KCC or reinvested in the on-street parking service in our district.
If I could come back, I found it incredibly difficult to get parking enforcement out at weekends, particularly to crowded areas. Is there a trick that councillors understand that could tell me how we could do this? Because there are certain areas where on-street parking is chaotic at weekends, particularly outside recreation grounds when there's a football match and so on. And we need to have a system whereby we can put enforcement in place, particularly if it's revenue neutral. In other words, if the cost of parking enforcement is reimbursed by the fines. Thank you.
I think Marie can answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. I think if any councillor has identified a particular issue in their ward, do flag it with me and we can make sure that we do some targeted operations.
I did miss out Councillor Dan Smith earlier, so apologies.
Thank you very much, Chair. Going back to the coastal towns things, I mean, this is just an ideas thing, but is there any reason why we couldn't consider in parking strategy using, for example, the Reculver Park and Ride, Reculver site as a park and ride site, especially during periods, seasonal events, and then run the bus services across to Whitstable and back again, because it would make a lot of sense and also be quite good for our green feature to do that. Yeah, actually do a circuit. No, I know, if you had stops along the route, I mean, obviously you stop at William Street and so on route, and for each of the council car parks, you know, the bus could stop and drop people on, pick them up to go on round. Just as a suggestion, and also on the climate on this table for the climate change impacts, I just noticed that obviously it says, whilst you have an explanation further down that the impact on the council's target for being carbon neutral by 2030, this movement of cars from Canterbury into the park and rides is showing us no direct impact, which I found somewhat surprising because there must be a slight reduction. It does say further down in the footnotes, I see at the next point down, but it would be something that perhaps checking it if that truly is no direct impact, because I think there should be a slight reduction. And also, although the figures are not put in there, the movement from the car park band 1 and 2 into the car park band 3 will give a slight reduction because they're further out. So in half a kilometre instead of 3 kilometres, but more or less. But it's still a reduction in those terms. So let you have a think about that.
Bill?
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, we'll take those points away and discuss them within the context of the overall transport strategy, I think. The only thing I couldn't answer specifically about Reculver, I only know that I had been caught on a bus there down the lanes in the summertime because the size of the buses don't operate terribly well down some of those country roads.
Councillor Mellish.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in. Just on the Reculver, 2 points really, but one on the Reculver Park and Ride. The coastal community team have been in discussion for some while with Stagecoach and other providers for actually trying to bring in a hop-on, hop-off service, which would kind of highlight some of the areas, some points of interest around the district, particularly around Herne Bay. For instance, coming from Reculver through to Wildwood, through to the station, down onto the front, along the front again, so doing the bouncing barrel, sorry, the bouncing bomb, it's in my drinking habits. And again, through to Reculver, you have a circular route that way. And they've said yes, when they've introduced that in other coastal towns, it's been one of their most successful, particularly down in Ramsgate, they're saying. But there's been no sort of, I think it's gone off the boil at the moment. So if we can put some sort of pressure on that, that would be brilliant. If I may, Chair, just that Councillor Buckman kind of reminded me about the issues around Riverside. And there are 2 points, 2 contributions from in the consultation document, both from one from a manager on the Riverside site, and also one from, I think, from the bid. Also, saying about how the employees on those sites are having, presumably they're on minimum wage, working in the entertainment industry and so on, that they're paying £10 a day. So what if they're working a 6-day week, £60 a week out of the very minimum wage to actually park in that car park? Whether there can be some other, it might be a note to cabinet, to look at ways in which we can start discussions about providing them with either cheaper or free parking. I think it's the manager for the Riverside site suggests a corner of those premises being set aside, which aren't used at the moment, apparently, according to the consultation document, which could be set aside for employees on the site. That may be an issue we could look at.
Yeah, it might be wise looking at travel plans also for the Riverside, because what it does have is a pretty frequent bus route in the what was the Triangle service, but then that won't link with everything. So I think there's things to look at there, because obviously ultimately we want people to be able to get to work and not be spending huge chunks of their salary on getting there.
Very quickly, sorry, I was going to say, Councillor Naomi Smith had kind of reminded me. For instance, if you finish work at 9-10 o'clock, which you probably will do at those later, you need a car. You can't get home, particularly if you don't live in the city centre. If you live out of Blean, if you live out of Reculver and those sort of places, you can't get home. So therefore, you do need a car. Again, it's outside of the remit, perhaps, of this chamber and of this council. But again, those discussions need to be had about what that sustainable transport package is about.
And I think there's a general point there about how we're supporting our economy, and that is worth hearing. Councillor Brady's been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. I think, can I just come back to the point that was well made about on-street enforcement? And speaking to quite a few councillors, there is a bit of an issue with scarcity, or a perception of scarcity of enforcement officers. Now, if we're hearing that on-street parking, if there is a surplus, then that goes to KCC, or it needs to be put back into the round and into the funding stream. I think it would be quite prudent to look at what funding we have, if there is a surplus, and then could that be put towards additional officers? Because we want to keep that money, and we want to make our service better and our roads and residents happy. And I think that's one way that will make our residents happy, if we're able to invest in that substantially this year. And I think that'll be quite timely.
Any comments? Yeah, Marie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, certainly we'll take that way and look at that. We have done quite a big recruitment drive recently to increase the capacity within that team, but we'll certainly take it away and look at it. Thank you.
Just to come back, so to evidence that's what we're doing, I think it would be worthwhile this year.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come back. I do have to say, I don't really get the bus first policy from Canterbury City Council, because it's something we don't control. And in 11 years of being a councillor, as far as I'm concerned, there ain't enough money to do what we need to do. There's not enough money to do police force, so we have lawlessness in the streets. We have no control over the funding for the bus first policy. And when it comes to Reculver, you can't get a bus to Reculver. I've got a resident lives in Hove. She's 85. She pays £25 a day to get a taxi because she can't get a bus. So it's 50 quid if she wants to get to Canterbury and back. You know, so the bus first policy isn't really working. So I don't get it. And even myself, if I wanted to come into Canterbury on a bus with me and my wife, that's £6 return. It's not going to cost me that in fuel. So instead of going to Canterbury, we go to Westwood Cross because all the shops are there for what she wants to do, and you've got free parking. So the bus first policy, as far as I'm concerned, is a dead duck because we haven't got any control over that, and we certainly haven't got the money to subsidise it. I mean, unless the bus was £1 a pop or something like it does in Spain when I went there one time, it doesn't quite work. So I don't know where we're going to change people's mindset and get people out of a car. You know, going electric and all that, it's fine. And then the government changed the goalpost, so the electric's going up, but that's going to drop down because you're going to pay 3 pence a mile. So the taxes are going up because it was free tax, now it's £500 a year. So people are confused. I've just bought myself a petrol car to cover myself for 2030 when it all changes. You know, so I'm kind of ahead of the game because then by hopefully in 10 years' time, possibly when I get another car, the policy would have changed and I'll be that old, probably might even get a bus pass. So thank you, Chair.
Does any officers want to come back on any points? Otherwise, I think we can wrap up the debate. No further comments from anyone? Okay. So we'll take a recorded vote then, in that case, on this item, and all the comments have obviously been minuted. So, John, over to you. Just to be clear, we are voting as and summarised from the beginning. We're recommending to Cabinet that item numbers 1 to 4, as set out in Appendix 1 and 2, are implemented on the 1st of April 2026. Yeah, oh, we got a. You okay, Jean?
Sorry, that's. Give me 1 second. I'll run that again. 1 second.
We're going to run the vote again. Apologies. Okay, if you can vote again, please.
Okay, that has carried. 8 votes in favour, 1 against, and 3 abstained.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We now move on to item number 7, which is Housing Revenue Account. Revenue and Capital Budgets 2026 to 2027. That's on pages 40 to 71 of your packs, and we're considering the report of Marie Royal, Service Director People, and Nikki Mills, Service Director Finance and Procurement. We've also got Officer Gary Pesca here, Housing Strategy Manager, and Sam Joyner, Principal Accountant. Gary, you're going to introduce this one, aren't you?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'd like to introduce the report about the housing budget for next year. The budget's been prepared in response to a very challenging policy environment that we're facing, and it's challenging both locally and nationally. So, for example, we're dealing with the findings of the Regulator of Social Housing. We've got new legislation about damp and mould. We're facing issues about compliance and improving existing council homes while trying to deal with the decarbonisation of our existing stock and build new council homes as well. So the main proposals within the report focus on the annual rent increase, and this is heavily constrained by central government policy. So it's proposed that the rent is increased in line with central government policy, which is CPI plus 1%. So that would be a total increase of 4.8% next year. The situation is complicated with regard to the rent because, as the report explains, we're waiting for an announcement from central government on rent convergence. So that's about trying to gradually bring all rents up to the formula rent level. The government was supposed to be making an announcement on this at the November budget. That has since been delayed until January, and as of today, there's been no announcement. The timing now is going to become critical, simply because there's a lot of work that's got to be done behind the scenes regarding preparation of the housing benefit accounts on the computer system, increasing the rents within our own financial systems, and that takes time. We also have to give all our tenants 28 days notice minimum of any increase in their rent. So really, the absolute deadline that we need the announcement from the government is about the middle of February. Once it gets past that, it's almost the point of no return for being able to implement that from the 1st of April. So that's really just to flag up a potential problem that we are facing. It is possible that although the government has indicated its intention to introduce rent convergence, it may not do so simply because of the impact on the exchequer. Because most tenants are on housing benefit, therefore the main impact of rent convergence will fall upon the National Housing Benefit Bill. Service charges are the other main source of income for housing, and Council has agreed in the past that we will aim to recover the actual cost of providing services. And this year we expect that the cost of most of those services, things like communal lighting, etc., will remain broadly similar to what they are this year. In recent years, we've had to cope with quite hefty increases in utility bills, but the situation appears to have stabilised, and we're expecting service charges to remain broadly similar to this year. Residents in our Shelter Plus schemes will receive a reduction in their service charges when the recommendations of the Older Persons Accommodation Review start to be implemented. So there are likely to be reductions mid-year, which we will obviously report to councillors as and when we're in a position to do that. It's proposed to increase the rents of council garages to £19.50 a week from the current rate of £18. In previous years, councillors have approved that that the council ought to be more commercially focused in terms of the rent levels. So increasing to £19.50 brings us up to the upper end of neighbouring councils' charges for garages, but still puts us well below the rents that are charged for private garages in the district. And there are also still proposals to outsource the garage management to increase revenue to the council and to improve the quality of the garages. and that will be the subject of a later report that will be brought before members. The stock condition survey has been outsourced, and we expect to receive very detailed information and data about the condition of the housing stock to enable us to programme improvements to council housing, including decarbonisation programmes. And also a reserve has now been established to facilitate preparatory work to support the building of new council homes. In terms of public engagement, unfortunately, the consultation process only garnered 3 responses from the public, 2 of which were positive and 1 of which was negative. But in addition, on the 9th of December, there was very positive engagement with the residents' engagement panel. We went through the budget proposals in quite considerable detail with the panel, and they endorsed all the proposals. So last year, full council gave delegated authority to Cabinet to approve the rent increases, providing that they accord with government policy. So that was a departure from previous council policy. So this will be the first year that Cabinet takes the decision about the rent increases. And the reason for doing that was because, as I've already indicated, there are very, very tight timescales about getting the rent increase administration done, making sure that we adhere to the requirements of the tenancy agreement for our tenants, and being able to do that all in time. And then the rest of the budget goes to full council as in previous years for approval. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to recommend to Cabinet that Cabinet should A, resolve to approve the proposed annual rent increase and rent convergence for 2026 to 2027 in accordance with government rent policy, and B, recommend that Council approves the draft housing revenue and capital budgets for 2026-27 set out in the appendices A to C. Have I got a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Naomi Smith. So I'll open the debate. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Thomas.
It's a slightly departure from actually what we're here for, to be perfectly honest with you. But I did read on page 46, it measures water shortages and droughts in the future as part of the future planning. I can't think what the word meant. Basically, we're running out of water now. There's some residents, Whitstable, Tunbridge Wells, I know it's not in our district, but, you know, should we seriously considering not allowing more housing or big developments in the district until Southern Water can guarantee water supply? I know this isn't a meeting, but it's in the report.
I think that's a little bit off scope for this.
Well, it's in
and
the
I
report,
appreciate
yeah.
why you've made it, but
Okay.
I think it might be. Is there a more relevant point?
Well, on that one, it's just, well, we do have to be aware of it. It's something we need to sort out. I don't know where you go from that, but on the other, there was another. I can't think of the word is on home improvements. Are we talking about putting in heat source pumps? Is that what we're talking about? Decarbonisation? Because I do have concerns about heat source pumps, because there's some properties that actually costing the residents more money to run because electricity's more expensive than gas, and some of the properties, because it's a constant temperature, it's quite difficult for some of the houses to warm up in time. So I am concerned that if we start going down the route decarbonisation, i.e. heat source pumps, I know it goes along with installation and everything like that if it's done correctly, but some of what I've listened to on the radio and the reports I hear on the telly, that some of the heat source pumps are actually costing more money to run than the gas boiler. So our residents could end up spending more money. Thank you, Chair. And the previous one's just a comment, really, but there we go.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the rent alignment, because as I understand it, we have tenants who've been tenants for an awfully long time on 40%, roughly. And then new people come in at the equivalent to whatever the local housing allowance is that correct? And are we then looking at bringing, so presumably we don't make a big jump for the people who are on the lower council rents, the ones who've been council tenants for a very long time at 40%, because to bring them up, because our newer rents are higher, I think, aren't they? And I just wanted to sort of understand that a bit, if I could. Thank you.
Gary, do you want to come back on anything?
Okay. Right. Rent policy, as you would expect, is suitably complex and convoluted. The vast majority of council tenants in the district pay social rent. That is generally, or that is assessed according to a very rigid government formula. And most social rents around about 40 to 50% of open market rents. However, we have some newer homes that the council has bought, thinking of properties such as the Woodlands and also the accommodation that we purchased under the Local Authority Housing Fund. We have been permitted by the government to charge affordable rents for those. Now, affordable rents are assessed as between 60 to 80% of market rent, inclusive of service charges. So there is a difference. One of the key issues about needing to charge affordable rents for newly acquired properties is the simple fact that, in all honesty, in the long term, social rents are not sufficiently high to pay for the long-term maintenance and responsibilities that we have as a landlord. And going back to your point about the rent convergence, this is basically affecting social rents. So the formula rent was brought in a number of years ago, but quite a number of our longer term tenants are not on formula rents. So new tenants who are occupying social rent properties are on formula rent. You're allowed to reset the rents when the property becomes vacant. But for existing tenants, for a number of years, their rent is just increased by CPI plus 1%. And for a number of years under previous governments, there was actually either a rent freeze or a rent reduction. So that just made the situation even worse. And we've never been able to recover that position. So the idea of rent convergence is that gradually over a period of time, everyone on social rents within an area who's living in a property of a similar size and a similar quality should be paying more or less the same amount of rent per week. But the only trouble with rent convergence is that it's going to take quite a number of years to actually achieve it. The government undertook a consultation process in the summer about the rent convergence and offered a potential range of solutions ranging from £1 a week to £3 a week. Obviously, the lower the level of rent convergence that you're allowed to charge, the longer it will take. And the average difference between the full formula rent and what a lot of our tenants are paying is around about £10 a week. So on that basis, it would, if they only allow us to converge by £1 a week, it'll take 10 years.
Come back with that on a question on that then. If a tenancy is, you get these family tenancies that if somebody's been, like a brother and a sister, and the sister dies and the brother takes on that tenancy, because, so would they have to pay a new rent, or would they pay the rent that they've always paid? Because we do get quite a few of those. Succession. Sorry, that's it. I knew there was a word. Thank you.
Right. If someone succeeds to a tenancy and there's only 2 successions allowed to a tenancy, then because they're succeeding to a tenancy and you're not granting a new one, then they take it to the new rent. To the existing rent, yes. Yeah.
And thank you, Councillor Thomas, for the interest in the decarbonisation agenda. Yes, we were successful in securing several £1 million of warm homes funding, which we are match funding through the HRA. We've identified 800 plus properties that are going to be a focus for that funding. But we are planning a councillor briefing to update councillors on what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what this scheme looks like. So I think that that councillor briefing will be really helpful in terms of giving you more information on that, but also enabling councillors who are interested to ask those questions.
Okay, Councillor Buckman is next.
Thanks. It was just a quick question on the fly tipping amount. What will constitute as fly tipping within the housing and repairs? Because it's sort of been stationary, the amount. Is there any way that it would ever go down, or it can be reduced somehow?
Thank you. Fly tipping, we are seeing a blight, more and more examples, especially on our housing estates. As landlord for those areas, we are liable to pay the cost of removing that fly tipping. We're currently looking at this at the minute with Canenco and with our environmental crime team to look at ways of how we can try and get more upstream on this and prevent this, maybe design out areas where we are seeing continual patterns of that type of behaviour, but also looking at sort of mobile CCTV so we can capture more images and evidence on fly tips that are happening. And it's also about education, engagement, and nudging behaviour change as well. So it's something that we are looking at as a housing service. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heaver was next.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. The first one's a sort of macro overview question. I've got a couple of line items in the housing revenue account. The questions for Gary, I suspect, and please forgive me because I'm treading very tentatively as I know how complicated this is and how little knowledge I have. But it did occur to me when I was looking through the agenda notes that, of course, the council was graded C3, which is obviously a serious priority for everybody to address. But in terms of budgeting, it seemed to me there were 3 huge variables. First, the one you mentioned, that we don't know what national government's going to do about this convergence policy, the rent convergence policy. Secondly, there's a working group looking into the C3 issue, and we don't know what they'll come back with. And secondly, we don't know what the condition of the housing stock is, which was part of the C3 problem, and we won't find out to July. So my question is, to some extent through nobody's fault, this is where we are. How do you make a budget around those variables? Or B, are there massive reserves dolloping somewhere in case all of those things go against us?
Yeah, Marie.
Thank you for those questions, Councillor Heaver. Yes, we have a Cabinet Advisory Committee looking at oversight, check and challenge and scrutiny of the action plan and the remedial work that we're undertaking to actually, drive up our judgment. Resources have been, extra resources, staffing resources have already been built into this draft budget to cover that. And in terms of the stock, we are really progressing with the stock condition surveys. So at the minute, We've got 43% of surveys that have already been completed. We have outsourced 26% of surveys to an independent company, again to accelerate that programme of understanding our stock. We have a considerable issue with no access to properties. This isn't a problem that's just common to access to do the surveys. It also links to access to do electrical tests, gas safety tests, and there is a particular issue with some parts of our tenanted community where we are not getting into the properties. So we are currently looking at that no access issue. We are reviewing our communications, our contractor communications. We're offering visits at weekends and evening times to try and meet tenant need. And we're also working with our resident engagement panel, again to look at how we can improve that access rate, how we can encourage tenants to let us in. Ultimately, as a landlord, we can take enforcement action if necessary, especially around electrical and gas safety. But obviously that's a measure of last resort. It's about being respectful, it's about working with tenants, it's about better communication and building up that trust and relationship. In terms of the stock condition surveys, we're already receiving data, and we are about to start the convergence into Decent Home Standard. So in the next few months, we will start being able to report on Decent Home Standard. But the benefit of the stock condition surveys is that we can take a far more medium to longer term approach to our investment in our assets, in people's homes. So once we know the common threads of areas of work that we need to focus on, we can build longer term programs to address these issues, make better use of contracts, more efficient spend on money. I hope that answers all the questions that you've raised.
Not really, no. Because my question was really about the budget rather than the amount of effort and obvious professional efforts being made to address that condition survey. Let me phrase it another way. Given the variables that nobody has that information yet, and we don't know what the working group's going to come up with, and we don't know what the convergence policy is from national government, are you confident that this budget is robust enough to deal with all those variables if they all go badly against the council?
So the working group is monitoring the progress that we're making against the issues raised. So the resources that we've built into the budget should pick up those issues. Sorry, in answer to that question. In terms of stock condition and investment in our stock, we've done a short-term plan for the next 12 months. So the data that we already have has been used to design the next 12-month programme of investment, and we've increased the amount of money that we're putting in aids and adaptations to improve homes for people with disabilities. So as a variable in the next 12 months, the asset management programme that we've got in place, we don't expect that to be a risk factor. We've done that. Once we have the data from the surveys, that means that from next year onwards, we will have more control over what we do when we do it and get better value from contracts. But that's for the next year's budget. In terms of balances, I don't know whether Nikki would like to come in terms of the working balance that we've got, as we do have a ring-fenced amount of money that we have got available if we need to invest more in certain aspects or if we want to pursue any acquisitions. But I'd invite Nikki to talk about the balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Marie. Yes, I oversee all of the balances and ensure that they are sustainable, and also the budget overall is a budget that is reasonable and will do what we need it to do. So I can confirm on that count, and also the amount of reserves that the HRA has got, which is obviously ring fenced just from the HRA balances. We've had a change in accounting procedure for 24-25 that's just been approved last night at audit committee, and so the balances are back to a healthy amount going forward from now on, because we were previously, over the number of years, there was a duplication of depreciation and MRP, so that has now been corrected, and going forward that means that our working balance for the HRA is much more healthier, which means that we've got a bit of a cushion if there is anything additional needed that comes up within the year. Thank you.
Just had a quick question, and I'll bring in Councillor Buttman. It was just around the reporting on the decent home standard, and do we have a target or a government mandated target for the amount of our housing stock which should be at decent home standard? And there obviously there is a budgetary implication for that. If we're having to sort of do things like comply, quite rightly, comply with OAB's law and so on, and prevent against damp and mould and all those sorts of things, that's probably more for future years, I suppose. But is there a sort of a target that we sort of look to and aspire to meet?
Yes, Chair. The government expects us to be 100% compliant with the Decent Home Standard.
Really straightforward answer. Good. Councillor Buttman.
Thank you. As you were saying that this is ring fenced, all the HRA account, you've got the playground repairs on there. Would you ever be able to take playground repairs out of this account and put it into like the normal budget as such, with all the rest of the playgrounds that get repaired and maintained and improved?
No. No. It's on HRA land, and so that is separate and has to be maintained from that pot.
Councillor Naomi Smith.
I'm going to come in on that because it was my question as well, because it is a bit of a bugbear of mine, this, that people who pay rent get a play, on an estate, there may be a play area or public, public open spaces that anybody can use, including the leaseholders. Now, the leaseholders don't contribute to that, but the people who pay rent do. It seems incredibly unfair that only the people who pay rent are, because I presume it's calculated into their rent, because it's not a separate service that they pay for. It's not like a communal charge. It's not a service charge. It's just part of the rent. But if you've bought your house on an estate, you're not paying for the play area that your kids or your grandkids are using. It does seem quite an unjust way of dealing with it. And I have a fabulous park and play area near me that is paid for by council tax and mostly Section 106 money. But the people who are paying council tax and rent. So it's like there's a double whammy going on there. And I just wondered if there's some way we can get around it. Thanks.
The short answer, I'm afraid, is no. Yes. Really, the situation is a historical anomaly. When our council estates were built, they were 100% council properties. And obviously, with the passage of time and the introduction of the right to buy, the tenure has become mixed. And unfortunately, colleagues in the dim and distant past, when the right to buy was introduced, didn't really address issues around things like the communal facilities, such as parking areas, children's play areas, those sort of things that had historically been paid for from people's rent. And there's no way that you can introduce that retrospectively because the properties have been sold, all the legal documents have been signed, etc., etc. So when it comes to householders who have bought the freehold of their home on a council estate, I'm afraid we're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Not that I want people on the housing estate to have to pay, you know, who bought the house have to pay for the plan. Could we give the land that's HRA land to our parks team instead, and therefore it becomes that, you know, rather than it being this thing that only, it's like an extra double whammy on council tenants, whereas the rest of us get it for free. So could we give the land to our parks people?
I think there are two issues there. A, we would be obliged to sell it to the general fund. So you can't just give away an HRA asset. So you would have to sell it. And B, I can't imagine that the general fund would want to accept that sort of financial liability, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just had some questions actually about the numbers to link up with the questions about sort of what was happening in the real world on the housing revenue account, which is page 49, if anybody's wishes to follow it. And there's just two big sort of numbers that stick out, and that'd be remiss of me if I didn't ask what was going on, if it had anything to do with what we were talking about in terms of what was happening in the real world, and that's again to do with the reserves. And the first one is that 17 million number transferred to from major reserves, which was 0 in the original, and then suddenly becomes 17 million in the forecast, then drops down to 6.5 for the following year. Just what's happening there? What's that all about?
Is that page 49, did you say? I see it, yeah. Nikki?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's the thing that I was talking about earlier about the MRP where we've reversed it. And so therefore the previous years and then the current years, because we're catching up, and also it wasn't budgeted for because we thought we would have to pay it, and we can't change the budget until it's been approved by Grant Thornton, our auditors. So that's the other side of the benefit that we're getting from it going into reserves.
Sorry, just to be clear, so we didn't put anything to reserves the last year, didn't expect to put anything to reserves this year, and then why did we suddenly decide to put 17 million in later?
That's the total of 3 years worth, in trying to summarise it in a easy format. It's 3 years worth of what was the MRP charge, which is about £5 or £6 million, somewhere in between there, and that figure then is the balancing figure to put it into the reserve that we and that is the 17 million coming off of the working balance and going into major repairs, so that we're allocating that so that it's not just sitting in the working balance, it's actually there to do major repairs in the future.
So that's the relationship, if you like, between having to put the stuff into reserves because of the unknown level of investment that might need to be made into the housing stock that was being described before, or are they unrelated?
It's allocating the amount because we have this change in accounting policy. So rather than that amount sitting in the balance, because it's catching up for the last, what we thought was 3 years, that was putting it into this budget and putting it into the major repairs, because that's what we will be using it for. So it's making provision for that over the longer term, so that it's not just sitting in the working balance, not knowing what it's there for.
Thanks.
Councillor Dan Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. To return to Naomi Smith's point about the parks and the possible ways to bring those to the Parks Department as opposed to the the housing. Is there some way of doing that via a lease arrangement, a peppercorn rent in effect? So it's a very small amount that changes hands. Just as a suggestion, and then obviously then funding would come via council tax and all the other methods that we normally get for funding.
Basically, they won't want to accept the liability of doing things like the regular inspections, paying for any repairs to equipment, making sure that the surface is safe, all of those costs that are associated with providing a park. So it's not just the transfer of a piece of land, it's those ongoing revenue costs. And you know, quite frankly, the general fund side of the council's budget is also in a difficult position. So, you know, it's a bit of a non-starter. I don't mean to sound sort of negative about it, but I can't see them really wanting to take it on or being able to take on that sort of liability. Yeah.
Something possible, but not necessarily desirable at the moment. Do I have any other questions on this? No? Okay. Councillor Butcher.
It was just a side question that with the Elvis House, when, if, and could we view it, or has it been completed? Because people are asking me, you know, I know it's by the side, but lots of people are saying, how is it getting on, and is it conforming to the carbon things? So just a bit of information on the side there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly. Just to update you, councillor, it should be completed by the end of this month. And I know that they are doing final internal finishing within it, like carpets and things like that. So it is pretty much ready for occupation. And I know that there are discussions about trying to get a councillor tour to go around so that you can go inside and visit it. And so there will also then be corresponding communications and press activity going on as well, as you can imagine.
Could you come back? Will the person living in it be off our council? Yeah, that's good. No, but it's going to be very prestigious.
Just to confirm, it's being used as temporary accommodation.
Ah, thank you.
Mike would help, wouldn't it? Thank you for everyone for your contributions on that. Lots of ground covered around things like rent convergence and decent home standard, and how we're using things like reserves and so on to fund repairs and things into the future. So hopefully lots of useful comments and feedback for Cabinet to consider there. So thank you. I meant to summarise the previous debate as well, which had lots of very useful feedback and suggestions on how we use parking revenue and how we put in place certain incentives, not least for parking, but also other modes as well. So I'll just reiterate then, the proposal is that the Cabinet should A, resolve to approve the proposed annual rent increase and rent convergence for 2026-2027 in accordance with government rent policy, and B, recommend that Council approves the draft housing revenue and capital budgets for 2026-27 set out in the appendices A to C. So I'll ask John to take a recorded vote, please.
And that is carried unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. Number 8 on the agenda then is the general fund revenue and capital budgets 2026-27, pages 72 to 182 of your packs. And we've got the report of Nikki Mills, Director of Finance and Procurement and Section 151 Officer. And so I'd like to invite Nikki to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've also got a little bit of migraine coming, so apologies if I'm not making sense. So, but I'll try and get through this. So, last but not least, the general fund budget. This is an update since November, and this, what you have in front of you, is a copy of the draft cabinet report, which is going on the 9th of Feb. There's been a few minimal changes since November. They are listed the financially on Appendix 1.3. Just to give you a bit of an overview, we've finalised the council tax base, which increased income by about £20,000. We've had the fair funding review from government, which I'm still working through all of the detail. There's a mix of grant funding with no inflation included, and also pooling other grants, but it's very complicated and still working through what the impact of all of that is to us. But overall, it's an increase in about £50,000 from what we assumed in November. These two additional incomes have been allocated across building control and bollards maintenance that are already in existence, costs that have increased, so this just covers those. Business rates also been reset, which is roughly a similar figure to last year's budget, so that's good that it's on similar lines. There's not a massive change to that in this budget. And then also included in here for Appendix 6, and there's 6.1 to 6.5 is all the consultation feedback. And the general fund wins the consultation competition at 49 responses. So I think that might actually be a record for the general fund. I don't know what we win, but the capital budget hasn't changed other than an additional amount put in for 28-29 to start replacing environment vehicles, which we will need to be doing at that point. Fees and charges have been presented exactly the same as they were in November to enable your feedback as well as the consultation feedback, especially on bulky waste, of which you'll see there was a mix of feedback from the consultation. And again, the views of this committee will be fed into the cabinet report in February. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Just at the beginning of this item, what we're asking the committee for is comments on the report, and these comments will be included in the minutes and taken into account when the report is discussed by Cabinet. And thank you, Nikki, for your introduction there. So I'll open the debate on that. Councillor Buckman first.
I know that community governance review was only on, was it Monday, or were you talking about it? But where would, say, the cost of that, where would that come out of, really? Yeah.
Yes, good question. Thank you very much for that. We would need to feed that into here, but in the report it does state that any community governance review will need to come from, see, I can't talk because I've got a headache, will have to come from the reserves, the budget stabilisation reserve, so we would just allocate out the amount from the reserve into another earmarked reserve to cover those costs, and that will be, now it's gone through, we will add that additional note from previous cabinet meeting going forward into the next one.
Thank you. I watched the cabinet meeting the other night when they discussed the CGR and decided to go proposed going ahead, but they haven't decided to go ahead with it, but they're proposed and it will come to full council. And Peter, one of the chief executives, said that there was a budget of 290,000 being allocated for this CGR, and that was a baseline. I'm quite concerned that to do a proper, if that's the baseline, how much could it go, and can we put a restriction on it? Because it's a huge amount of a budget to go out on this consultation, which people in Whitstable may well feel, well, you asked us only just over a year ago. It seems an awful lot of money to go out. And I want to know if that's what we're starting at, where would it end at? I think, you know, it's just, and I know you can't answer that, Nikki, but it is a concern that I want feeding back to the Cabinet. Thank you.
I've got a question just on, and I appreciate this might be quite a detailed one, on the costs of new environment vehicles. I think we talked about, I'm not clear, is that buying outright or is that leasing? Because obviously there are a lot of commercial vehicles, leasing arrangements like any other vehicle can be available. Then there might be a difference in cost between leasing vehicles or buying them outright, and whether that makes or could make a difference. That might be more of a Canenco question. So if it is, then maybe that's something that can be taken away and answered by Canenco.
No, it is the council that purchases the vehicles, and it looks at the cost effectiveness of all of the options. And previously we have purchased outright because I think that is more financially beneficial overall.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Don't see many hands at the moment, but Councillor Heaver.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of little line items, really, if I can just find my notes, sorry. Yeah, it was one of us back on reserves again, I'm afraid, sorry. But the budget stabilisation reserve is probably a question just for my education, really, but obviously that was set up during the time of COVID where things were very unstable and uncertain. But it's strongly recommended that this balance of 4.7 million is held in reserve, apart from, I think, about 0.4 million which is going to be spent. Just wondered why we're so particularly cautious on that. I know we live in an unstable world, we're not in COVID condition anymore. Presumably there are other reserves. Just looking for a bit of education on why we'd be so particularly cautious on that particular reserve, please.
Thank you, Chair. We are going into LGR, which is an unknown area that we've not been in before, so we may not be drawing down on it for the same reasons that it was set up for in the past. But there are other unknowns coming that we need to assess and have something there to support those.
Thank you. Can I ask another couple of line items?
Yeah, quick supplementary, yeah.
Okay, thanks. No, it's not sub, that answers that one beautifully. Thank you very much indeed. I just wondered what the new homes bonus was and why it disappeared, because it's quite a big number. Page 95, sorry, I should explain where that is.
Thank you, Chair. New Homes Bonus was a government initiative that gave funding for new homes that were built, and there was a calculation that gave that amount of what we would receive, and it was for a number of years, I think 7 years or something at a time, and then it depleted, and the government got rid of that initiative, and last year was the last year that we received it, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last one, then I promise to shut up. The capital plan temporary accommodation budget is to be cut in half from 2 billion to 1 billion. Obviously, that sounds a bit of a concern, even though I don't know any of the details behind it. Just, is that as serious as it sounds? Temporary accommodation is a very serious, obviously important resource. Should we be cutting it in half, or am I worried unnecessarily? Page 98.
Thank you, Chair. There was an initiative set up to purchase a number of properties for temporary accommodation, and that's the budget to do that. And then that will be reviewed on the success of it and assessed and established whether or not further temporary accommodation will be required, budget will be required going forward. But it's still in that initial phase of buying those initial temporary accommodation properties.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope I didn't give you too much of a headache, sorry.
Any other questions from anyone? Councillor Dan Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Just one on the charges going up for garden waste collection, which is page 130, I think, on the minutes. Just as a sort of suggestion, maybe worth looking at offering a similar reduction on the garden waste for the first bin that applies to the bulky waste, on the basis that those on means tested benefit and pension credits, one means tested benefit probably is a very tiny number of people in the garden area, gardening, and those on pension credit are ones who often don't put out their green bins. So obviously Canenco would have data on how many bins per house are not taken on garden refuse. But I would suggest that may be something worth looking at offering as to encourage as much green bin usage as possible in that on that area. Thank you.
We can feed that back, definitely. Yeah. I didn't see any further comments, unless any officers want to come back on anything else. Oh, sorry, I didn't see.
I'm on the page, and I've just seen park and ride options from 0 to 500,000 to 2 million. Sorry, yeah, 500,000 to 2 million to 8 million. I've got the figures right there. Too many noughts for me. I just wonder what that's about. Thank you.
That is a budget proposal that's been consulted on. That relates to Windcheap, doesn't it?
Chair just replied. It's a parking option, park and ride option that's been consulted on at Windcheap, and that's putting some provision in there if that is the option that goes forward.
8 million. What's that for? Multi-storey car park in Windcheap Park and Ride. Okay, that's fine. Might suggest saving that money and move it all to Dover Road. I am a broken record, but that's what I will say. And save £8 million and build the multi-storey in Dover Road. Thank you.
All comments have been noted. Okay, so I think there's no further comments. We will. We've made a note of everything there. There's no need to any specific or recorded vote on any of that item. So close the meeting then, can't we? Yep.
Yeah.
Date of next meeting is 7 p.m. on 12th of February. There's no other urgent business I've been notified of to be dealt with in public, and we don't need to exclude the press or the public. And no other urgent business under the Local Government Act or the Freedom of Information Act. Thank you very much for your contributions, everyone. See you in February.